All right, let's dive in. I want you to picture something. We're going back to London, right in the middle of the 1970s, and the air is thick with, well, honestly, boredom. See, the biggest rock bands in the world were making these massive, complicated, super polished albums. And for a lot of kids, it was all starting to feel pretty stale. I mean, seriously, have you ever been scrolling through your feed and just felt like everything looks a little too perfect, a little fake? That's exactly how kids felt about music back then. They were just so tired of these untouchable rock gods on massive stages. They were hungry for something real, something raw, something they could actually be a part of.
And you can really see the difference here. It's like two different planets. On one side, you've got mainstream rock, with its epic 10-minute guitar solos and crazy expensive productions. And on the other, this brand new sound that just exploded. It was fast, it was loud, it was simple, and most importantly, it was cheap. This was punk, and it was a full-on rebellion against everything mainstream music had become.
So you might be wondering, where did this musical earthquake hit the hardest? Well, all signs point to one city, London. It was the absolute perfect storm of frustrated young people, a ton of media attention, and a real hunger for something, anything new. You can almost think of London as the ultimate server for the punk movement. Because you had so many young people all crammed into one place, with newspapers and TV everywhere, ideas just spread like wildfire. A band could play a show one night, and their name would literally be all over the city the very next day. The streets, the clubs, the entire city was their stage. And yeah, forget about fancy concert halls. We're not talking about places with assigned seats and ridiculously expensive tickets. No way. We're talking about small, crowded, sweaty clubs like the Roxy or the 100 Club. The energy inside was just electric. And that wall between the band and the audience, it just completely disappeared. And that's what made it so different. You weren't just passively watching a show. You were in the show. The crowd was just as much a part of the performance as the band was. Moshing, which is basically just jumping around in this chaotic, super energetic way. It was this shared, wild experience, completely different from seeing some famous band from the nosebleeds of a giant stadium. Okay, so you could definitely feel the energy in those clubs, but what did this whole movement actually sound and look like? Let's break down the core pieces of the punk identity. The music itself was like a lightning strike. It was short, it was direct, and it was packed with this raw aggression. And, the most notorious band of them all had to be the Sex Pistols. They were famous for this super aggressive style and lyrics that were basically designed to shock everyone, from your parents all the way up to the Queen. But here's the thing, it wasn't just one sound. The scene was actually pretty diverse. You had bands like The Clash, who were mixing that punk energy with bass lines and the political vibe of reggae, creating something totally fresh. And then you had The Damned. These guys were absolute pioneers, one of the very first UK punk bands to even release a single. They proved this raw music could actually get out there to the masses. Now let's talk about the look, which was every bit as loud as the music. This wasn't just fashion. This was a uniform of rebellion. Every single rip in a t-shirt, every safety pin, every brightly colored strand of hair was basically a middle finger to boring mainstream society. It was all about creating your own identity from scratch. And the lyrics? They hit just as hard. This wasn't some fantasy poetry. Nope. Punk songs were about real life, about not having a job, about feeling like the people in charge just didn't care about you at all. The lyrics were simple, they were direct, and they gave a voice to a whole generation of frustrated kids. Okay, so now we get to what is maybe the single most important idea to come out of punk. I like to call it the DIY power-up. Seriously, this was the secret code that unlocked everything for them. DIY, it just means do it yourself. And think about it like this. Today, that's like starting a TikTok or a YouTube channel with just your phone. You don't need to ask some big Hollywood studio for permission, right? You just create. That was the punk spirit. You didn't need a record label or some fancy art school degree to make your mark on the world. And it really was that simple. You didn't have to be a musical genius. The message was clear. If you have something to say, just grab a cheap guitar, learn 3 basic chords, and go for it. Your energy and your message were way, way more important than how technically skilled you were. This DIY spirit went way beyond just the music, too. Before the internet, before blogs, before social media, fans made their own magazines. They were called fanzines.
People would literally cut and paste pictures and text together, write about their favorite bands, and then use a photocopier to share their passion with everyone. They were the original bloggers. So the original London scene, it burned really bright, but it was also pretty short-lived. So why are we still talking about it today? Because its influence is absolutely massive. It's everywhere.
You can literally draw a straight line from that first punk explosion in the 70s to so much of the music that came after. It kicked open the door for post-punk, it laid the groundwork for the whole alternative rock boom in the 90s, and its DIY spirit is basically the foundation for millions of independent artists today. So look, if you take only one thing away from all of this, let it be this. The most powerful message of punk is that you have the power to create your own culture, not just sit back and consume whatever is handed to you. And it's 100% true. Punk showed everyone that you don't have to be rich or famous to have a voice. A handful of passionate people with a clear idea and a ton of energy can genuinely shake things up and start a real cultural movement. And that right there brings us to the big question for you. Yeah, the tools have changed. It's not just cheap guitars and fanzines anymore. Now it's code, it's videos, it's digital art, it's entire social movements. But that rebellious, do-it-yourself spirit, that's timeless. So really, what are you going to create?